Welcome back, everyone, to Pig's Ear Interview here at the Tojo Dojo. I'm Myshtuff, joined by Riku Rose. How you doing today?
Oh, good, thanks, mate. You?
Pretty good, pretty good. This is the show. We're talking about all the things we've been watching and playing, and we definitely got a full slate today. We're talking about Resident Evil 8, maybe more specifically the expansion pack, but I'll talk a little bit about the game itself too, the core game. We got Resident Evil 2 Remake. Then we got Don't Worry, Darling, and then a lovely documentary called We Met in Virtual Reality, which is vaguely video game related. We'll find out
That's
more.
not about us.
yeah, it's not about us, exactly. So stay tuned for that one. But yeah, there's a lot on the agenda today, so let's just get right into it. So Resident Evil, I know earlier in the year I talked about kind of old style horror games because I'd played Tormented Souls, which was kind of a return to form of old style horror survival classic games. And then I, of course, talked about all the Silent Hill games. But Resident Evil is one that we haven't, I don't think we've touched upon too much. But what's been great is after this, we're going to talk about your experience now playing Resident Evil 2, which is exciting that you're finally doing that. But other than that, I think you said you had played the original, or at least the remake of the original before, right?
Yeah, my brother had the original,
Mm-hmm.
like back on the PC in like the late 90s.
Yeah.
And literally the only things I remember are the two things everyone remember: the zombie in the hallway that turns around in that scene and the dogs coming through the window.
Yep, classic.
Because my brother wasn't the most dedicated gamer, so like if he died once, he was like, done with this game or whatever, if he like had to go far back or whatever, so he never got far in it, so I never saw much of it.
Yeah. Okay, that's fair. Resident Evil is interesting. I love the Resident Evil games, as good or bad as they can get, just because it ranges from like serious to campy to like action to survival horror, so it's a really good variety of games, even with a couple of the spin-offs as well. But I have to say, so Resident Evil 5, it was very goofy, but it was still like, it's a fun co-op game. But then Resident Evil 6, I think universally most people just look at as just a pile of shit.
That's the one with the giraffe getting sucked up, right?
Yeah, there you go. That's it.
Yeah.
That's the one people remember from that one. God, I can't believe no one like thought about that for even like a second. But leave it to the internet to come up with something like that. So after 6 came out, they kind of I can't remember. No, the Revelations games I think came out before 6. So I think after 6 they kind of took a break for a little bit, which I think was a smart move. And then they came back with a revitalization of the series with Resident Evil 7. And I have to say 7 is probably one of my favorites in the series. Like it's kind of crazy how a game that far into a franchise can like reinvent itself. And I was surprised because it's legit creepy, because in Resident Evil 8, which I'll get to in a second, is a direct continuation of 7. But like with 7, it's the gist of it is a guy named Ethan he gets a message from his wife who's basically gone missing in like backwoods Louisiana, and things don't go great with the family there. Like it gives off like Texas Chainsaw Massacre vibes with like the gross, weird inbred family, and like it's just disgusting. Like I don't know if you have any interest in playing some of these later ones or not, or as much. Like I mean, from what you've seen of the later ones, like do they interest you at all? Or
yeah, but it's what I talked to you about before. Is my thing is I feel like I have to play everything to get there. Yeah. So to me, it's like this mountain to climb before I get to 7. I'm just like, but I'm like, for me, it's like I climb in Mount Everest and I like get up one little bit and I'm like, just camp here for a month.
Yeah, I'll come back to it another year, maybe. Yeah, that's totally understandable. And fortunately, even though you could, of course, treat most of them as independent games, what is nice about Resident Evil is that there is lore between them, which is pretty cool, and they do a good job of like expanding the universe. But yeah, Resident Evil 7 was like legit creepy, and that was around the time where PT was happening. So like Resident Evil 7 is a first-person game, and it's very like eerie at times. So they did an incredible job with that game. Like I love that game. So then Resident Evil 8, of course, that's a direct continuation of 7. And funny enough, I remember before 8 was coming out, there were some interviews saying Capcom purposefully toned down the horror for 8 because apparently 7 was too scary for people, which I thought was interesting.
Well, it was VR as well, weren't it?
Yeah, so okay, here. All right, I'm gonna get on a soapbox for a second. So yes, it's in VR, but only on PlayStation,
Yeah.
and I don't have a PlayStation VR headset. But I have Resident Evil 7 on PC and a VR headset, but it's not released for the VR portion is not on PC.
So
It's
I
it's
played the
stupid.
demo,
Hmm.
right? But I didn't realize it wasn't calibrated like all the camera correctly,
Hmm.
and my character was like 3 foot. So I'm looking up at everyone like,
You're just permanent crouch mode.
well, I didn't. I was like, at first, I'm like, am I a child? Am I a dwarf? Like, and then like everyone, and like everyone's talking to me, but like as if I'm eye level, and I'm
Yeah.
like, something ain't right here. And like my brother, who was just like watching me, was like, press this button, and I pressed it, and like I shot up like 3 feet. I'm like, oh, okay.
That makes more sense now.
Yeah.
See, that's the true horror of Resident Evil is people don't look at you and you're 3 feet tall.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you're 3 foot, you're not being sent by like the FBI or whatever to investigate like some paranormal shit.
But what a premise for a horror game. Maybe that'll be the next Resident Evil 9. That's what they'll
Yeah.
do. So VR, yeah, only on PlayStation. But either way, even if you play just normally, it's still a creepy game. Awesome, highly recommend it. But as far as Resident Evil 8 goes, like I said, yes, it's a direct continuation of 7. And really, the point of this game is you're now transported to like what looks like almost like Transylvania in Europe. Basically, you're like in this like woods out in Europe, and there's this big castle that you eventually go into.
And big ladies.
Oh yeah. Oh, we'll get to that in just a second. Don't you worry. But yeah, you're kind of transported in. Things don't. Something. I'm not going to spoil it, but something happens right in the beginning where you're kind of rushed out of where you are because you're kind of living a happy life after 7. Something happens, and then you're, like I said, you're kind of exploring this castle area and stuff like that. But yeah, the premise of the 8th game is that there's these 4, I forget what the term is, like lords or something like that, where like bosses essentially, and they each have a different area throughout the game. One of them is Lady D, as she became famous with this game, and goddamn, the internet went nuts for her. I'm sure everyone saw.
Yeah, you just must be like a Capcom. They're like, oh, look at our lovely logo, and they're like, looks like a giraffe being fucking sucked off. And they're like these Japanese men just getting like, oh, and then like they release like 8, and they're like, look at this beautiful character. I want her to step on me, and then like,
yeah, there was a lot of weird shit that came out from that one. But you know what? It's all great. I had a blast watching that stuff. There were some interesting videos and fan fictions online with her. But I will say the other characters of those 4 main characters were also interesting in their own right. And overall, Resident Evil 8, the main game, was awesome. And that one is also in first... Well, I'll get to the expansion in just a second. Originally, first person as well. But this game, I will say Resident Evil 8 is kind of a blend of 7 and 4, in the sense that 7 was like more horror, but 4 was more... That revolutionized Resident Evil back then with being more like action oriented. So this seems to be like a really good blend of those two, where it's good horror, good action. You have fun the whole way through. It's good. It's well paced. Like it's a great experience. So definitely Resident Evil 8 as a whole is really fun. But then last week they came out with the expansion pack to add to it, which people were waiting for a while, and it added 3 things. So it added third person mode, which was neat. So now you can play both the core game as well, I believe the expansion as well, in third person or first person. So that's pretty neat. You have an actual story expansion with the daughter of the main character from 7 and 8, and it takes place many years later. And then you have additional levels and characters for the mercenaries mode. So for anyone who doesn't know what that is, there's been a tradition for Resident Evil games of something called mercenaries mode. I don't know if it's in every Resident Evil or not, but I think in a good amount of them, where it's like an arcade mode where you just have like time trials where you're shooting them and like a bunch of like hordes of zombies in a certain amount of time, but you have like certain objectives you have to do. So it's kind of like a fun arcade mode, just extra thing you can do, and you can unlock characters and guns and stuff like that. But the main thing that people, of course, were wanting is the expansion story pack. And without spoiling it, I'll try and cover it vaguely, but like I said, he plays the daughter of the main character, and you're kind of going into like a dream world a little bit, and you're trying to get rid of some powers that you might have, some interesting supernatural abilities, because she has said like she doesn't want them anymore, and she was plagued. And that plays into the main 7 and 8 story a little bit as well, once again, without spoiling it. But that's the premise in general. But it's just more Resident Evil 8, but just with a different character at this point. So it's just, it's only like 3 hours long. And I will say in this expansion, there was also one legitimately creepy part that, like, because I was playing this at night too, and all the lights off and everything. And there's this one part where these mannequins are following you, but only when your back is turned to them. So if you're looking at them, they're frozen. But the second your view starts going away, you hear like this click clacking behind you. But then if you turn, they stop again. And there's actually one part of that where you need to escape, but you have to do it walking backwards the entire time, or else they'll kill you. And so then you have to look from like multiple viewpoints to make sure like they're not coming at you. And that was like legitimately creepy. I think they did an awesome job with that. So yeah, Resident Evil 7 and 8, like they're definitely doing well with bringing back the horror to the franchise, which is nice. Because normally, like when you see a lot of horror games, they're like not that scary. It's just like, okay, you might have a jump scare or something here or there, but these are actually good about like atmosphere as well. So
jump scares aren't impressive.
Well, exactly, yeah.
Like jumping out at someone and saying "boo," like they're probably go but like it's not impressive. Like setting up that they might be going crazy and convincing. Like that's more impressive.
Yeah, exactly. Like in Resident Evil 7, the main bad guy, he is terrifying, not because of like an individual jump scare, but it's this really like weird backwoods redneck character who like will just not leave you alone, and he keeps chasing you, and it kind of like almost to some extent like Nemesis or Mr. X from 2 and 3, where like he just keeps coming after you and he just will not die, and like he's coming around from different corners, but like you always like there's parts in 7 where you're like in a house and he's not in the room with you, but he's like upstairs, and you hear footsteps like above you constantly, and you're like, where the fuck is this guy coming from? Like it's just like that part in VR I've heard makes people like shit themselves because it's just creepy like at any moment. It's really weird. So overall, definitely thumbs up, not just for 7 and 8, but the expansion pack. Just this package of 7 and 8 and everything like have been awesome games. Highly recommend all of them. But I will say I do have one gripe with this expansion pass. Okay, so the Mercenaries mode, which I said is kind of like that arcade mode, which it has all these extra characters and stuff. So the thing that they marketed for this expansion pass is, you can now play as that Lady D, as well as one of the other lords, Heisenberg is his name. And they're like, here you go, you can play as them, you got some extra levels. I'm like, sweet, I'm going to jump right into that. Oh, wait. To unlock them, you have to beat all 6 levels with an A rank, which is no easy feat, and one of them on an S rank, which is even harder to even play as them. I'm by no means the greatest gamer, but like I can usually get through this type of stuff. I've tried multiple times to get through just like the 3rd level on the necessary rank, and I can't do it. So I can't play as them, which is like really bothering me that they did not mention that.
You just want to play as Bryan Cranston as Heisenberg.
Yeah, sorry, different Heisenberg.
I was going to buy the game right now if he was in it.
Yeah, this is actually the next part of the Breaking Bad universe after Better Call Saul ended. I forgot to tell you. This is where it leads to. Yes, his name is Heisenberg, but a different one, unfortunately. I think he does wear a hat, though, now that I think about it, kind of that black fedora. But yeah, so you can't play as them until you get these ridiculous rankings. And like, I'm going to try a couple more times, but I've already tried like a half a dozen times, and I just can't get to it. And I'm like, well, I guess I'm just going to give up at this point, which really sucks because I really wanted to play as them, which is annoying. So that's
the moment a game makes it frustrating, it's not doing its job. Like you said, like Dark Souls when you played that recently and stuff, but like you enjoyed getting to the end result with stuff like that. And if not, then what's the point? I can't remember what I played recently. I think it was Live a Live. Yeah. Where I pressed the wrong answer at the end and got the bad ending, and it was like, play the last hour again to get the good ending. And I was like, no, I'm just going to go on YouTube and watch it. It's like really not a big issue.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just annoying too, because like it would be like my preference for this would have been, how about you just beat the levels in some capacity, because just beating them sometimes can be a little bit difficult too, but usually you can kind of work your way through them after 1 or 2 tries. And I think that would have been enough to have you play through all of them, and like, cool, you did it, now you can unlock them. But they're like demanding perfection on all of these levels so you can unlock them, and I'm like, this is just stupid. So what I'm wondering, I don't know how many other people feel this way, to be honest. What I'm curious about is if they're going to do some sort of either a patch, or maybe if you pay $1 you can unlock them or something like that at some point, because like I honestly don't think the average person can beat these levels at the necessary rank to get them. Like they're absurdly difficult from what I've tried so far. So
fuck them.
That kind of, yeah, fuck Capcom. So yeah, actually, I'm burning all my copies of Resident Evil. After
how many death threats have you said this week?
At least 7, actually, probably. It's only Saturday. But yeah, either way, other than that minor gripe, I will still say 7 and 8, and there was some expansion stuff for 7 as well, kind of minor, but the expansion for 8, this complete package, definitely thumbs up for the most part for everything. Highly recommend playing them both. They're awesome games. Like, they're super fun, good horror. Yeah, I had a good time playing them, so definite thumbs up.
Okay.
All right, over to you for Resident Evil.
Resident Evil 2. I played the remake of the original one about 2 Halloweens ago. Yeah. I was like, I had nothing to play in October that year, and I was like, everyone always goes on about watching and playing spooky stuff in October. I'll give this a go now that I live in America. And I bought Resident Evil 2 a while back, and I just never got around to playing it. And yet again, October, I had nothing to play, and I was like, I guess I'll finally give it a go. First thing is the beginning with the burger, the guy eating it. I don't know, but the burger physics in this are fucking amazing. Like, this is up there.
Burger physics.
This is like, I don't know if you remember in Like a Dragon where he eats the bread in the prison, and just collectively everyone went, wow, that's some good looking bread. Like, it's up there with, this is up there with that. That was my main takeaway from the game.
All right.
Thumbs up.
Yeah, done.
No, so with Resident Evil Remake, when I played it, firstly, it's ridiculous. These games are ridiculous because it's like, it's an old mansion that we set up a load of puzzles in a laboratory in the basement. And I'm just like, okay, why? And then in this game, they're like, the police station used to be an art museum with secret tunnels. I'm like, who is the fucking architect that kept getting hired in this city? Like,
I love it.
Yeah, we went over the estimate by like 4 million, but you got some secret candles here that I'm going to give you if you put them in the right holder, a passageway.
It looks beautiful.
Yeah. But with the original one, I didn't care enough about the puzzles. So I'll admit, I looked at a guide for a lot of it, because a lot of it was very obtuse stuff as well. It was like, pick up this key that's in a corner that doesn't light up. You just have to hit X in the exact right spot and you'll get it. Stuff like that. I was like, I don't care enough to actually figure this out myself. But with the quality of life stuff in this one, I actually just really enjoyed doing everything. I like looking at the map and going, right, well, in that room, that door's still locked and I can't get in there at the moment. Oh, but wait a minute, now I have this. So if I go back to that room, I can finally use it on this, and maybe that'll give me something. And I enjoyed that. I really liked it. I liked seeing the map, knowing the layout of a small... Because this isn't a big area.
Right.
The police station's pretty small. But...
Yeah, they utilize the space very well.
It's kind of like Metroidvania-esque.
Sure.
Which I don't really like that term, because that's like half of the games in the world.
But yeah, there's areas that you can see, but you're gonna have to wait till later to access. But once you get those abilities, then you can go back. So yeah, like I said, they utilize the space very well, and it's a nice progression. Yeah.
What's annoying is when you get like a clue to open something, you're like, yes, this is gonna blow open everything. It's just some extra ammo, and you're like, fuck,
right. Damn it.
But no, like obviously, the story isn't anything special. It's cheesy, like late. You can tell this was like a video game written in the late 90s for the most part. Like,
oh yeah. Well, do you know who Leon is based off of? The look. If you had to take a guess, late 90s actor.
I bet is it like celebrity. Charlie Sheen or something? Like, I don't know.
No. Someone who has that hairstyle, blonde hairstyle, teenage, college-age boy.
Not Leo, was it?
Yeah.
Oh, really? Oh.
Yeah.
I guess I could see that.
I can't remember if it was formally or officially stated, or if it was just kind of like a rumor. But people were saying they just based it off Leo because Titanic at the time, he was getting more popular, and he looks fairly similar to it.
But there was there's a guy and a girl who kiss in this game after 2 conversations.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm just okay, that's fucking ridiculous.
Right.
It's like in Highlander where he just makes out with the woman randomly that he's been arguing with the entire movie.
But it's because the movie needs to happen.
yeah, but that's it. Is you can see that sort of we need action, we need a romance. Very hit the points of when games were trying to be more cinematic, but the writers weren't Hollywood writers.
Right. But that's the best part. It's the perfect crossover of video games and Hollywood, where they don't know enough about certain things and they're just making it up as they go, and it's great. I love it.
Yeah, it's really cheesy. This feels like I think I've said to you before, when money came into video games in the mid 2000s. Business people came in because they saw all this money being made, and they're well, we got to cater to this audience, we got to cater to that audience. Whereas in the late 90s, early 2000s, it was just a bunch of Japanese men being well, this will be fun.
Right.
But this feels if that carried on.
Yeah, okay. So in in another week or whenever we do our next episode, I'm going to talk about Bayonetta 3. Yeah. And that's part of why I like that. I already know I'm liking that game. I'm not done with it yet. But because, it's that kind of sensibility of fuck whatever the norms are of all this stuff is. I'm just going to make a goofy-ass game and have fun with it. And it's reminiscent of those style. And I mean, the guy who made it, I believe, came from Capcom of that era, so it makes sense. But it's funny you would mention that.
So you talked earlier about people walking above you in RE8 and stuff. So I've got surround sound. I don't know if you have and stuff.
No,
it's really good for this game because you'll go in a room and because you can't really turn your camera very quickly or brilliantly. Mm-hmm. I can be right, there's a zombie to the left of me, or Mr. X is behind me, things like that, right? The issue is when you have a wife who comes in and starts asking a million questions. To the point where she knows the PlayStation controller has a microphone built into it. Uh-huh. So I told her that if she spoke, it would alert the zombies. just so I could focus on it and she wouldn't ask me questions about it.
Look, we got to pretend we're in the police station with him, all right? The zombies are going to come flooding in. You have to be quiet.
Yeah, I was if you keep talking, it's going to bust through, it's going to kill me, I have to start all over again. She's
I love it.
Yeah,
perfect.
Great. But look, to get quality gaming time in when you're married, you got to do what you got to do. Okay,
I understand. I'm in the same situation. I get it.
All right. So anyway, I beat Leon's story first, right? And everywhere I read was oh yeah, you got to do the second round to get the full story and stuff like that. And I even asked you and a few other people. I was do I really need to? Because I've seen conflicting things online. Some people saying it's just the same thing, and everyone was no, do it, do the second part and stuff. I want to know who went in the police station and put everything back together again.
There's cleanup duty afterwards.
Yeah, but they set the helicopter back on fire and took all the puzzles I'd done and put them back and stuff like that.
Yeah, that is one part of Resident Evil. To my knowledge, if I'm thinking correctly, no other Resident Evil game has done what that game did in terms of both of the stories and going back and replaying in that way. And I appreciate what they were trying, but frankly, I feel like it ends up just being more confusing, and kind of unnecessary.
not even confusing, because at the end of the day, you can just roll with it, right? But
well, sure. Yeah.
I think what I would have preferred, because I think I looked and I played this game for 11 hours, right? I would have been happier if it was an 8-hour game and somehow there was a mode that put the stories together and you went back and forwards between the characters.
Yeah,
that would have been more fun to me, because like 50% of the second story, you're redoing the same stuff.
Yeah, that's
and
fair.
It's not different enough that it's interesting enough to do it again.
Mm-hmm.
But I was enjoying the gameplay so much, I didn't mind as much. But
Yeah,
I would have enjoyed the game a lot more if it was just that couple of hours shorter and you didn't have to redo stuff that you didn't want to redo.
yeah, exactly. I mean, that is the good part about the remake, is they're doing they did a good job with making it fun. Like, they modernized it, but obviously they still kept a lot of what people loved about the original version. So yeah, it's a blast to play through, and it's just a cool place to explore. So yeah, that's the good part about it.
Yeah. No, I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot more. The reason I hadn't played a Resident Evil game again for 2 years is because the first one I came away from like, yeah, it's all right, like
Mm-hmm.
whatever. But then like after this, I was like, well, how much is Resident Evil 3 at the moment? Like,
Mm-hmm.
like I'm ready to like carry on with this series because it was like I didn't play Metal Gear Solid until like just before the fourth one came
Uh-huh.
out, and like I played like all three of the original like 1 through 3 like back to back
Mm-hmm.
because I was enjoying it so much, and
Yeah.
that's how this one made me feel.
No, that's good. Well, the good news is if you're gonna play RE3 next, you can literally beat it in 4 hours.
Yeah,
So
yeah, that's the
it's
only
quick.
reason I'm not really because I saw it was on sale on like the PSN store for like $5 or whatever, but I missed that sale and now it's like 20 again.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, I always see it on sale. I'll just wait again.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I know it's a bit of a hot take as far as whether or not the third remake for 3 is good, and some people say, well, it's only 4 hours. And granted, if you paid a full price, 60, whatever it was when it came out, for 4 hours for that game, I can kind of understand it. Like, I know we've talked about quality versus quantity, and game length doesn't necessarily have to be the only dictator. But I will say they did cut a significant amount of content out for whatever reason from 3. But granted, I still had a blast with it.
They had
Like, it
a
was fun.
deadline to
But
hit.
I mean, maybe at that point. But yeah, you could beat it in like 4 hours. So it's good. So that's good though that you're
Yeah,
going to be continuing it.
yeah. I think because there's so many Resident Evil games as well, I kind of want to give it a bit of time. Because I know the remake of 4 is out in January.
So that's what I was going to ask you. Whenever you get to 4, are you going to play the original version, or are you just going to wait for the remake?
Oh, at this rate, I'm thinking I might wait for the remake. Like,
Yeah.
it seems like everyone, because I was like Googling as well, like, right, what's missing from this? Because I've heard stuff is missing. Like, should I play the original? Should I play the remake? And everyone's like, just play the remake. And I know a lot of people have said stuff's cut from Resident Evil 3, and you might be able to tell me whether it's true. But yet again, people are like, it's nothing that's like necessary.
Yeah.
Like, they're like, if you're going to play one, play the new one.
Yeah, I mean, I'm more just confused or baffled of like why they cut out a decent amount, because I think for Resident Evil 2 remake, I mean, granted, it's been a long ass time since I played the original one, but I think it was a pretty faithful adaptation, or not adaptation, Jesus, a remake, where they didn't really cut out all that much. But for 3, there were some parts, but I wouldn't say they were like significant story parts. I think it was just areas that maybe people thought weren't fun. I'm honestly not sure, but.
Yeah.
Like I said, I still had a blast with it either way. 4 is going to be interesting because I'm hoping they don't cut the campiness from it, because like 4 has some goofy campy shit, which just makes it an incredible game.
I'd say 2's
So we'll
pretty
see.
campy. Like just the action and stuff like that, and the overtopness, and
Yeah.
it's still got that campy feel. It's more the look of it that's serious.
Yeah,
You
that's
can
fair.
tell like the aesthetic, they're going for like a Last of Us type serious vibe, but they still have that cheesy acting and over the topness.
Right. Yeah, so it's gonna be great either way. So I'm excited.
Yeah, I'll give it a
sounds like,
thumbs up.
Yeah, sounds like you liked it. I'm glad you're getting into these now, and yeah, it's been great. Just got to get you into the Silent Hill games now.
Yeah, one at a time. One at a time.
Exactly. All right, cool. Well, on to the next one. Still on you.
Yeah, Don't Worry, Darling. I actually saw this a while back when it came out in the theaters. My wife wanted to see it because it's Harry Styles. And I'm like, what? And she was going on about this movie for ages. Like, oh, yeah, Harry Styles doing a movie, blah, blah, blah. I'm like,
Sure.
Okay, I'm going to get dragged to that, I guess. And then we were watching some movie, I don't know what, and like the trailer for this came on, right? And I was like, this looks like some David Lynch shit.
Yeah, you were telling me about that.
Yeah, and I'm like, what? Like, I'm like, now I want to see this movie.
Oh, man.
Because I like Florence Pugh, who's the main actress in it. She's good. And I'm watching it. I'm like, okay, that actually looks interesting. That looks interesting. And also, as well, something I liked, didn't really know what it was about.
All right, perfect.
I watched the trailer. Now, the trailer, it's like 50s America, old school, and it looks like this woman's going crazy. You know, that's like the impression the trailer gave off, right? And there's like ballerinas with messed up faces dancing at her, and I'm just like,
all right.
I'm like, okay, this thing I can deal with. And then leading up to this movie, I don't know if you saw all of this like controversy around the movie. So Olivia Wilde directed this movie.
Okay.
And apparently, it was at like the Venice Film Festival or something. Like Florence Pugh was refusing to promote the movie, and then all this stuff started coming out about how Olivia Wilde was like sleeping with Harry Styles on the set, and they were both being really unprofessional.
Oh God!
And then like a rumor started that like at the Venice Film Festival, Harry Styles spit on Chris Pine. Like, yeah, it just got crazier and crazier. And like,
wait. But why Chris Pine? Wait, how is he
in the
involved?
movie? He's in the movie.
Oh, okay. Yeah, like, where did he come from?
But there's like this video in it. Like, I think they both came out afterwards and like this didn't happen, but it looked like Harry Styles like spit on him. And like it came out the other day, like Olivia Wilde gave up her dog so she could spend more time with Harry Styles, and like people were saying Olivia Wilde, Florence Pugh essentially shadow directed the movie because they couldn't get Olivia Wilde on the set, which made me then go like, okay, this is now I'm even more interested. I'm in. Well, it was like when Cats came out, and I like saw the reviews. I'm like, well, you got to see it now to see this train wreck.
Right, everyone likes a train wreck. I get it.
Yeah. And here's the thing. I watched this movie. I really, really enjoyed it. And then I started thinking about it afterwards.
Okay.
And I talked to you about this feeling before where it's like post-nut clarity with movies. Where the more you think about it, the less you like it. Now, 5 minutes into the movie, I'm like, in my head, I'm like, I think this is what's happening. And it wasn't, but I was pretty close.
Okay.
But I think my version was better.
Nice.
And it essentially boils down to a not very good episode of Black Mirror.
Interesting.
All right. Like one of the weaker ones. I still think this is an interesting movie to watch, and I'd recommend people do so. But I wouldn't say it's anything groundbreaking. Florence Pugh is amazing in it. She gives a really good performance. Chris Pine is like the antagonist, and he is fucking chewing the scenery, and he is great. Like, I've not seen Chris Pine in much outside of like, what was he in, like Wonder Woman and stuff like that.
Star Trek and a few others.
Yeah, but this is here. He's loving it. He's loving being the bad guy. He's just always got this like smirk on, overacting to the point where it's like not bad, but like good. Harry Styles is there. To be honest, he doesn't have a lot to do. I'm not going to hold it against the guy, but he's not the greatest actor. He's probably the weakest person in the main cast, but he wasn't given a lot to work with either.
Interesting.
I just think this movie could have done a lot better. It set itself up really well. It set up the world. It set up the plot very well. But it turns into a very Hollywood movie by the end of it.
I've also heard, and I can't remember if you told me this or maybe I just saw some article headline saying there was a lot of people comparing this movie to some other movie with a very similar, like a very specific movie with a similar premise. And I don't know if it was like, and to be honest, it's been a while since I've looked at it, so I can't even remember what it was. But I thought I remembered someone saying like this premise was very similar to something that came out, and I'm talking like 20 years ago type of movie.
Yeah, which it would kind of spoil it if I said what it was.
Okay, sure.
The obvious influences of this is stuff like the Stepford Wives.
Yeah, I think that may have been it.
Right,
yeah.
and it's not the same plot as that. I'd say it's actually more the same plot of another movie, which, as I said, I won't say. But that's the feeling it has when you go into it. It felt like a modern reboot of the Stepford Wives, and I kind of like that, where it's setting you up for something and does something different.
Yeah.
But I just think it was a very stupid direction it went in.
That's a shame.
Yeah, to the point where you're just like, well, why? Like, you could have done this so many better ways. Like this, it seemed like not the hardest direction to go, but it's. I can't believe no one was in the room and went like, this is stupid. We could go a much simpler way with how to end this, and it would be so much better.
That literally happened. Okay, talking about seeing a movie and then thinking about it, that literally happened with Halloween Ends, where like both me and my wife were like, you literally could have done 2 or 3 other things that would have instantly made this a much better ending. And we're similar thinking like, did no one in the writer room like pitch these ideas, or did they and they got shot down? Like infinitely better than the garbage idea they ended up ending with. So like, yeah, it's weird how often that keeps happening, I feel like.
Yeah, I just don't get it. I don't get it. Apparently this was a movie that is what's that list they release? It's like the best unused scripts or something of the year. They call it like the blacklist or something. It's like I think this was one of those movies. And that was it. And you could tell like 15 people had written on this.
Yeah, that's never a good sign.
No, and that's it. It's a shame because it was. I think on Rotten Tomatoes it got like 30 or 40%. I don't think it deserves that bad thing because there's really good performance. It's still a fun watch. You're not going to regret watching it. It's not that kind of bad.
Yeah.
But as I said, when you come away from a movie with great performances and you're like, it felt like a bad Black Mirror episode, which is essentially like soap opera pulp drama. I'm like, oh, it's a shame.
Yeah, it's just forgettable at that point. It could have been special. Well, also, I didn't realize Olivia Wilde is she a director? I guess.
Yeah. This second movie. The first one she did was that movie Booksmart. I told you about before. But with all the drama surrounding it, I wouldn't be surprised if this is her last one.
Oof! Yikes.
Yeah. Oh, and that was the thing as well because she was married to Jason Sudeikis. And they got divorced, and apparently Florence Pugh was dating Zach Braff, and Zach Braff and Jason Sudeikis were like really good friends. And then, of course, on the set, she's dating Harry Styles, and like that
high school drama.
Yeah, that played into the whole drama of the thing why no one was getting along and stuff like that. Like. Everyone was like on Twitter when all this was going on, like loving the drama behind the whole thing.
Oh man, yeah, it seems like there's more drama for this movie than praise.
Yeah. I mean, I would give it a soft thumbs up. Like, I think it is worth watching for the performances and some of the ideas, and even some of like the direction is beautiful. Like the cinematography of it is great. It just doesn't stick the landing. And I will get. This is it though. Is I would rather a movie tries than does it easy or is just really bad and annoying. I at least will praise this movie for doing that. Yeah,
I'd rather see something new than the same old shit every time. So I hear you on that one. Yeah, it's interesting. I think like you. Yeah, I guess the last thing I'll say really quick is like you, this is not a movie I really had any interest in originally, but given not just what you had said about giving it a chance in general, but the fact that like it was giving off those like Lynch vibes or like suburbia weird underbelly potentially type of thing. Like that's I think even conceptually it's fun just to see that stuff. So yeah, I might give this one a shot then potentially as well. So all right. We met in virtual reality. So this movie, Sorry, excuse me. Documentary. Groundbreaking documentary. This is a weird one. So the point of this documentary was it was done over COVID, like fairly early on, I think in or maybe mid 2020, something like that. And the whole point of this documentary is a person is trying to explore essentially VR chat. And if for anyone who doesn't know what that is, VR chat, it's a free VR program where basically just people have avatars, they go in and you can like explore worlds, just have like little, chat room type of situations. There's games people make in them. It's just an open
There's like
environment for people to do.
YouTube, like big YouTube clips of just like random conversations people have had. I remember watching one where someone talked about like how their ex died, and it was really sad and stuff like that. There was one where a guy talked about PTSD he had, which was slightly undercut by the fact that he looked like Winnie the Pooh.
Yes, exactly. So I will say really quick, here's how I'm going to have to talk about this documentary. I have to separate this documentary versus like VR chat itself. And granted, this could apply to any VR program, I guess, but I think the focus really for the most part was VR chat. But really what it is purely just showing that people in VR chat are having normal lives or trying to do different interactions and just showcasing it to people. And this entire documentary is shot in VR chat. Like it's someone who was shooting it as if they were in VR chat the entire time. There's not any like real world footage. If I remember correctly, there's not even like, there's not like a narrator per se. I mean, there is a sequence of things that are being shown, but then anytime they're like interviewing someone, it's in VR chat. Like they're talking to the avatar and they're it's like an interview, but instead of in real world, it's just in VR chat. But basically the whole point, once again, was just showcasing these different situations. And I have to say there was some good to this. So like a really cool thing, similar to what you just said a second ago, was there was one person who was teaching sign language in VR chat. And it was like I don't even know if she was like an official teacher per se, but she was essentially holding classes where in VR chat, there were like a room, like an auditorium of like 100 people, and she was teaching sign language. And so people can ask questions, and they had like a zoom in on her like avatar. Like she had, I guess, an advanced like VR tracking thing for her hands, where the actual like hands, it wasn't, like in VR chat or in normal VR, it's like, it kind of looks like a glove where it's just going like this. But in this one, it was actually like fully moving essentially for her, which was pretty neat. So she was showing sign language and teaching, and I was like, oh, well, that's actually pretty cool. Like that's a very neat use.
Here's my thing is partly that is cool, but you can do that over Zoom with actual hands.
You could. Yeah.
And it's probably easier and more accessible to people.
Probably, yes. And yeah, I don't think anything in this documentary is trying to say that it's efficient to do these things, but it's more that these things are there. And I think it really, if I had to say what the goal of this documentary was just to show, whether it's successful or not, it's trying to show that these people are actual normal people with regular lives and interactions, and some of them are, some people go into VR chat for fun. Some people do it because they have social anxiety. Some people are disabled and they want to live out life as someone who has a full capability of their body, which once again, I think doing that is totally fine. I think that's fantastic that exists. All I'm going to say though, for this documentary, it was the cringiest thing I have ever seen. Like, as because of how it was presented. And so to give you an example, like I said, on one side of the spectrum, you had what I was just saying about like the sign language, and it was done very, like that part was done well. It was very like well-intentioned, emotional. Like it was great to see these people learning, especially if they were deaf. And I was like, that's awesome. Here's the other side of the spectrum they were showing. There was this one VR chat room or world you could go into where it was like a nightclub essentially, and your avatars could dance and like hang out and get like drinks or whatever. But then there are people, because they have like full tracking bodysuits in some cases, where people are like actually dancing. Like they have like stuff on their legs and arms.
See, I think of is some guy in his spare bedroom just then like going like that. That's all I picture in my head.
Yes. That's some people, yes, are doing that, but then there are some people who are like fully doing on dance routines, like fully choreographed dance routines. And here is one particular part. So there was this couple that met. So it's called "We Met in Virtual Reality," and so the part of this documentary as well are couples essentially who have met over virtual reality, but like they've never met in person, or like maybe they're about to for the first time or something like that. But they had this couple who met in virtual reality, and so they had this thing that they would go to this nightclub every Friday and they would talk and like do dancing or whatever. Okay, so for this particular part of the documentary, the one person, the woman, was saying like, "Hey, I created this choreograph dance for like this her boyfriend. I guess they were officially a couple, and so they got the whole nightclub to like stop talking and like watch them like in the center. And so this like avatar was giving basically a lap dance to another avatar. But here's the worst part, because there was lag like of what was going on, her body was like contorting every which way during this dance. And but the thing is, they had this emotional music playing, like this was a beautiful thing, and her body is like half bent in half, and I'm like, I can't do this. This is so, I'm getting so much secondhand cringe that I can't handle this, and it looked awful.
Yeah. So have you seen the movie Ready Player One?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, don't get me wrong. If you told me I can put on a headset and drive a DeLorean and go in the battle with the Iron Giant, that's awesome. I'd be there. We aren't there.
Right.
Right. We aren't there. Going to a nightclub with a guy who looks like Fred Flintstone and also one of She-Ra or something, like that doesn't appeal to me when they like look weird and like. I've seen clips of this stuff, and it's not good. Like,
and that's the thing. Once again, I want to be very clear. I think as someone who's using VR chat, it can be fun. Like I have VR chat, and I've gone into some of these worlds that are awesome, either on my own or with like other people, and it is fun. But when you're trying to have some of these situations portrayed in a documentary, and it's like I said, it's lagging and not working appropriately, and it looks goofy with these avatars. But the whole point of your documentary is you're trying to show that these are like just regular old people. It's such a disconnect of what you're watching, and it's just so weird.
Here's my thing with any of this kind of stuff, and it might sound a bit dismissive, but at the end of the day, I don't think it's healthy. Is people who substitute real life for the fake life, right? And like we grew up in the 90s where everyone was like, everyone's addicted to video games and they don't know what the real world is anymore, and like that's all bullshit, right? But you do see these documentaries and these articles now about people who like leave their wife for their World of Warcraft girlfriend. And,
right.
You know, like stuff like that. And I'm like, that's not it's not the real world. Now, I've never played Dungeons and Dragons, for instance, right?
Sure.
But the idea of going in someone's house and playing it for 2 hours and like making a game out of it seems fun to me. That seems fun, right? But you then don't look at that as the only joy you get out of life. Like, I'm not enjoying the real world. I'm only enjoying when I'm pretending I'm an orc. Or on this virtual reality stuff, like, I've seen the trailer for this show, and it's people like, oh, I can't go to a real nightclub, so I go to this nightclub. Well, this isn't going to make you any better about going to a real nightclub because it's not real. You should look at alternatives to make it more comfortable for you to be able to do social interactions in real life.
Yeah, it's a bit. I do. Yeah, I think maybe to put it a slightly different way, I think using these as potential tools that could be helpful, but then what happens is people keep using it as a crutch for way too long, and then that's where it becomes a problem. Like if it's maybe like a sparingly thing, or maybe in the beginning, and then they eventually move on to a more quote unquote normal way of doing it, I think that's fine. But yeah, there's some like as part of this documentary, there's people who are like, I'm just going to keep doing this forever, like I'm never leaving, and I'm like, healthy. it's not. It's like, look, and as someone who loves, both of us love video games, and even for me, like I have a VR headset, I like to use it, but there's at some point where you do have to disconnect from it, and it's not. Yeah, I would agree with you. I don't think it's healthy long term.
Like as I said, you said about the whole lady who does sign language on it and stuff. As I said, there's probably better and easier ways to do that. But that seems like a cool use. People are learning something, things like that. Now, as you said, I could understand if people use this for... I've tried VR, right? And you can sometimes get a bit absorbed into it, but it doesn't take long for you to realise, oh, wait a minute, I'm actually in my living room, right?
Yeah.
It's very easy to be like, I have social anxiety, so I use this to cope, right? This isn't helping you in the real world get better about your social anxiety. Now, look at Twitter. People don't talk to people in real life like they do online.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
It's very easy to call someone an arsehole. It's very easy to tell someone to go die. It's very easy. I've seen it where like females online get like rape threats and death threats, right?
Yeah.
And these people wouldn't say that in real life.
Right.
Like
hopefully
if you,
not, but yeah.
Yeah, like people wouldn't talk to you the way they would talk to you in the street online, right? And that is what I think when people go into these things like the nightclubs in VR chat, you're going to feel a lot safer than you would in a real nightclub. Not necessarily like in terms of getting harmed or anything, but in terms of you're going to get people who suddenly feel like they can get away with stuff that they have no business getting away with.
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't think the technology's there yet for anything cool.
Yeah, well, but I guess even if the technology was there and it was very close to being one-for-one to actual reality, even then I would probably still have the same sentiment of use it sparingly or for fun, or maybe with an existing friend group you already have who are just looking for something fun to do. But if that is your only outlet, then yeah, that becomes a dangerous...
Second Life was the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, there's not a real game there. I don't feel like that's not fun, like, to me. I'm sure it's fun to some people, but I remember reading stories about people who were selling their real house so they could get a better house in Second Life.
Right.
You know, and you're like, no, there's a problem there. And that's what my issue is actually more with the documentaries and stuff like this, because I remember documentaries back in the day, and some people would be like, oh, this is mean or kink shaming and stuff, but there's a channel called Channel 4 that used to show like raunchy stuff, right? I remember a whole documentary about people who like love dolls.
Oh yeah, I saw one documentary about people who are in love with inanimate objects. It's probably one of my favorite ones.
But these documentaries kind of pointed out these are people that aren't okay with being in society like normal, and they have issues, right? They weren't like, oh, this is normal. We got to accept this.
Sure.
You know, and I'm like, sometimes people need to get a grip on reality a bit.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. I mean, obviously, the lines can get blurry depending on what exactly we're talking about. But like, there are certain, I'll say more on the hobby side or social interaction side of things, there is a limit.
Yeah.
Like there has to be a limit, or else you're just going to continue to spiral probably into a depression or outcasting yourself from society. And like, I mean, granted, if that's all you want from life, I mean, I guess more power to you, but at the same time, don't complain that your life sucks if you're not willing to break from that.
But I don't think people like that want that in life, because the reason they're doing it in VR is because there they feel like they can have it, what they want in real life.
Yeah.
And I think a healthier alternative would be to try and help them get that in real life.
I would hope so, yes. I think so. I mean, granted, once again, I know there are certain circumstances for people, once again, who might be disabled, or have certain parts of the population that just flat out can't. But once again, that's usually a minority, and the most of the people we're talking about are ones who could take that step to make it better and choose not to. So, yeah, it's
mainly
fascinating.
The nerds.
Yeah, a bunch of fucking neckbeards. Speaking of which, so I don't know. So once again, I guess as far as this documentary goes, I'm going to give it a thumbs down because it was nonstop cringe for the most part. I mean, like I said, there were a couple little gems in there, like I mentioned with one of them, and like one or two other situations that like were genuinely endearing, and I was like, okay, that's cool. But like 90% of it was cringe, and I'm like, if this is how you're like, the thing to me is I don't know who this documentary was for, because if it's for people who already know what VR and video games are, this isn't like telling you anything new. This isn't like informative. But then if this is supposed to be for a general audience who are trying to get a glimpse at what these people are, this is the worst way to introduce them, because they look even worse than probably what these people thought about them already. So like, I don't know what the point of this was other than HBO. I think, yeah, because it was an HBO Max one, to basically make, I think they even made the claim like first ever documentary to be completely shot in VR. And I'm like,
there's a reason why.
Right, exactly. Like, it was not very good. I don't think you want that claim, but okay, I guess you can technically make it. So yeah, I thumbs down for sure for the documentary. Don't waste your time on this fucking thing. But as far as, once again, the actual VR piece itself, as we've just said, yeah, play it. It's fun. It's a good time. VR chat in itself is pretty good time, but have healthy boundaries on it as well.
Yeah.
So it's interesting either way. But yeah, so I think that wraps it up. Definitely had some good ones in there and some mixed to thumbs down in there as well. a little bit of both,
of everything.
Yeah, we try to mix it up, from time to time on here. But yeah, if you've ever watched any of these or played any of these, definitely let us know down below. But until next time, when we talk about more stuff, we will see you then. Take it easy.
Bye.